The evening air in Nairobi was cool and heavy with the smell of rain. Cars honked impatiently at the red light, their headlights shining against the puddles on the road. Inside a sleek black SUV, Damilola Adeyemi sat quietly, lost in his thoughts. He was only 30, yet one of the richest men in the city, a billionaire who built his fortune through technology and smart investments. People called him the young genius, but deep down he often felt something missing. Every day was the same: meetings, numbers, success, applause. But none of it made his heart full. He had everything money could buy, but peace was not one of them. As he looked out of the window that evening, something caught his eye. By the side of the road, near an old concrete wall, sat a young woman. Her hair was messy, her face pale, and her clothes torn. She had a small basket beside her, filled with handmade bracelets and tiny carvings she was trying to sell. But no one seemed to notice her. People walked past quickly, holding their bags close, pretending not to see. Damilola felt a strange pull. There was something different about her. Even though she looked tired, her eyes were calm, full of quiet strength. He spoke suddenly. "Stop the car," he said to his driver. The driver blinked. "Sir?" "Stop," Damilola repeated, already opening his door. The driver hesitated. "It's not safe here, sir. This is not a good area." But Damilola didn't listen. He stepped out, the sound of his expensive shoes splashing in a puddle. People nearby stopped to stare. What was a man like him doing there? He was tall, well-dressed, and clearly didn't belong on this street. The girl looked up, startled, as he approached. She quickly lowered her eyes. "Good evening, sir," she said softly. He smiled kindly. "Good evening. What's your name?" "Amara," she whispered, her voice barely above the sound of traffic. "Amara," he repeated, liking how it sounded. "Have you eaten today?" She hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "No, sir. I will eat when I sell something." Damilola frowned slightly. "How long have you been sitting here?" "Since morning," she said. "Some days I make enough for food. Some days I don't." He looked around. The shops were closing and people were hurrying home. It was clear she hadn't sold much, maybe nothing. He turned to his driver and said, "Bring something to eat. Rice, stew, and a drink. Quickly." The driver looked uncomfortable. "Sir, you want me to buy?" "Yes," Damilola said firmly. "Now." The driver nodded and walked off. Damilola sat down beside Amara on the pavement. The move shocked everyone nearby. A few people slowed down, whispering, some even taking pictures. But he didn't care. "You don't have to sit here, sir," Amara said nervously. "Your clothes will get dirty." He smiled faintly. "It's fine. It's just a suit. I can clean it." She looked at him properly for the first time. His face was calm, his eyes gentle. There was kindness there, the kind she hadn't seen in a long time. "You're not from here?" she said after a moment. He chuckled. "No, not really. I'm from across town." She nodded slowly. "You talk like those big people who live in the city center." He laughed softly. "Maybe I do." When the driver returned with food, Damilola handed it to her. She hesitated. "I can't take it, sir. I didn't earn it." "Please," he said gently. "Just eat. You don't owe me anything." Her stomach growled loudly, betraying her. Embarrassed, she smiled shyly and whispered, "Thank you." Then she began to eat, slowly at first, as if she couldn't believe it was real. He watched her quietly, feeling something stir inside him. She didn't eat like someone greedy or desperate. Every bite was careful, grateful. She paused often to whisper, "Thank you, God." When she finished, she looked up. "No one has ever done that for me before," she said. "No one." She shook her head. "People give coins sometimes, but they never sit down. They just throw and walk away." He sighed. "That's sad." She smiled faintly. "It's normal. Life is hard, sir. I don't blame them." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the city surrounded them, cars, voices, music from a far-off bar. But in that small space it felt quiet, peaceful. "Do you have a place to stay?" Damilola asked softly. Amara looked down. "Under the bridge, near the old bus station." He frowned. "Alone?" "Yes. But it's okay," she said quickly. "I'm safe. The other women there look out for each other." He nodded, though his heart ached hearing it. He had never known what it meant to sleep hungry or cold. Her strength humbled him. When it was time to leave, Damilola stood up slowly. "Amara," he said, "I'll come back tomorrow. Is that all right?" She looked surprised. "Why would you come back? You've already helped me." He smiled gently. "Maybe I just want to talk again." You seem like someone who has good stories. She laughed quietly. Me? I don't have stories. I only have memories. Then tell me some of them tomorrow, he said before walking back to his car. The driver opened the door quickly, whispering, Sir, people were watching. You shouldn't do that. They'll talk. Let them talk, Damilola said calmly, looking out the window as the car pulled away. They don't understand. As they drove off, he glanced one last time through the glass. Amara was still sitting there, holding the empty food pack, smiling faintly to herself. That night, Damilola couldn't sleep. He lay on his soft bed, surrounded by silence, thinking about the girl on the street. Something about her had touched him deeply, not pity but admiration. She had nothing, yet she had peace in her eyes. He had everything, yet he couldn't find that same peace. Meanwhile, under the bridge, Amara curled up in her thin blanket, thinking of the strange man who had sat beside her. She didn't know his name, but his kindness stayed with her like a small light in the dark. And though they were worlds apart, one surrounded by gold, the other by dust, fate had quietly tied their stories together that night. Neither of them knew that their brief meeting by the roadside was only the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The morning sun rose softly over Nairobi, its golden light touching the city's busy streets. People hurried to work, cars filled the roads, and the smell of fresh bread floated from small shops. But at the edge of the city, near the bridge where Amara had spent many nights, a black car waited quietly. She sat on the curb, tying her worn sandals when the car stopped in front of her. The window rolled down and she saw a familiar face, the same driver from the night before. Are you Amara? He asked. She nodded slowly, unsure. Yes, sir. He smiled politely. My boss wants to see you. He asked me to bring you. Her heart began to race. Your boss? The man from yesterday? Yes, the driver said. Mr. Damilola Adeyemi. Amara blinked. I don't understand, why? He didn't answer. Please come. He's waiting. She hesitated. Everything in her told her this was strange. People like Damilola didn't call for girls like her. But something in her heart whispered that she could trust him. She stood up slowly, picked up her little basket of bracelets and climbed into the car. The seats were soft, smoother than anything she had ever touched. She held her basket tightly, afraid she might break something just by being there. As they drove through the wide, clean streets, she stared out the window, amazed. She saw gardens, big houses, and gates taller than trees. Her mind spun. Why would a rich man want to see me again? When the car stopped, she looked up and gasped. In front of her stood a mansion, wide marble steps, shining windows, and a fountain that sparkled like glass in the sun. This can't be right, she whispered. There must be a mistake. The driver smiled faintly. No mistake. He's inside. Before she could protest, a maid opened the door. You must be Miss Amara. Please come in. Miss Amara. No one had ever called her that before. Her feet trembled as she stepped inside. The floor was smooth and cold under her worn shoes. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like stars, and everything smelled of flowers and clean air. Then she saw him, Damilola, standing near a large window, dressed simply in a white shirt. When he turned and smiled, her fear melted a little. Good morning, Amara, he said warmly. I'm glad you came. She bowed slightly, unsure what to do. Good morning, sir. Why did you send for me? He walked closer, his voice calm. Because everyone deserves a chance. She blinked. A chance? For what? To live differently, he said. You told me you stay under a bridge. That's no place for someone like you. She shook her head quickly. I can't stay here, sir. I don't belong in a house like this. He smiled gently. You do now. I've prepared a room for you. You can rest, eat, and start fresh. You don't owe me anything. Amara's eyes filled with tears. I don't understand, sir. You don't even know me. Maybe not yet, he said. But I believe in what I saw, kindness. You reminded me that peace isn't in money. It's in the heart. She wiped her eyes, still unsure. But people will talk. They'll say things. He shrugged. Let them talk. I don't live for them. That day changed Amara's life. The maids gave her clean clothes, soft as clouds. She bathed in warm water for the first time in years, and when she looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. Her hair shone again. Her skin looked brighter. And when she smiled, it was real. At first, she felt out of place. She didn't know how to sit at the dining table, how to use the fork and knife, or how to walk without feeling small. But Damilola never laughed at her. He helped her gently, teaching her with patience. He hired a teacher to give her lessons in reading, writing, and computers. "You'll need this," he said one morning. "I want you to build your own life." She looked at him with wide eyes. "You're teaching me like I'm family." "Maybe you are," he said softly, then smiled. "Or maybe you will be." Amara blushed and looked away. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion grew brighter with her laughter. She worked in the garden, helped the cooks in the kitchen, and greeted every worker with a kind word. Even the guards began to smile when they saw her. Her presence brought warmth, the kind that money could never buy. But not everyone was happy. Some of the staff began to whisper. "Why is she here?" one maid said quietly. "She's just a street girl. This isn't a charity home." Another sneered. "He must pity her too much. Or maybe he likes her." They laughed behind her back, but Amara never replied. She remembered her mother's words, "Kindness doesn't need to shout." One afternoon, as she watered the flowers, Damilola came out to the garden. "How are you settling in?" he asked. She smiled. "Better than I thought, sir. Everyone has been kind, mostly." He noticed her pause but didn't press. "You look happier," he said. She nodded. "It's strange. I still wake up thinking I'm under the bridge. Then I open my eyes and see this room." He smiled. "It's real, Amara. You deserve it." She looked at him curiously. "Why me, sir? There are many poor people in this city." He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "Because when I sat beside you that night, you didn't ask for money. You just smiled and shared peace. I've met rich people who never gave that." She lowered her gaze, touched. That evening, as they walked around the fountain, the wind lifted her hair gently. Damilola watched her, realizing that her presence had already changed him. For the first time in years he felt something real, not the empty joy of success but the quiet warmth of connection. Still, the whispers grew louder in the house. The butler, Mr. Sephew, frowned when he saw them together. "Sir," he said one day, "forgive me but people are beginning to talk. They say bringing her here is not proper." Damilola looked up calmly. "Let them talk. I didn't bring her here for approval. I brought her here because she needed hope, and maybe so did I." That night, as the house went quiet, Amara stood by her window, staring at the city lights in the distance. She couldn't believe she was inside one of those shining homes she used to watch from the street. Yet even in her comfort she prayed softly, "God, don't let this be a dream. Let me be worthy of this kindness." Down the hall, Damilola sat in his study sipping tea, his mind full of her smile. For the first time in a long while, his heart felt light. Not because he gave but because someone had reminded him what giving truly meant. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew one thing for sure. Meeting Amara had changed everything. Days passed softly in the grand mansion, each one weaving a quiet bond between Damilola and Amara. What began as kindness had turned into something deeper, something neither of them fully understood but both could feel. She no longer trembled when she saw him. She laughed freely, teased him gently, and even helped him plan his business charity events. Every morning she would bring him a cup of tea and say, "Sir, you must rest more. You work too hard." And every time he would smile and reply, "Then stay and remind me to rest." She would blush, shake her head and walk away quickly. But her heart beat faster each time. The mansion was quieter now that her laughter filled it. Even the staff who once whispered behind her back began to see her differently. She was no longer the poor beggar they had pitied, she had become the heart of the home. Damilola often found himself watching her when she wasn't looking. There was something peaceful about the way she moved, how she spoke with gentleness to everyone, even to the maids who had once mocked her. One afternoon, as the sky grew heavy with clouds, Amara stood by the window watching the rain begin to fall. The drops tapped softly against the glass. Damilola joined her, his hands in his pockets. "You love the rain?" he asked. "Yes," she said quietly. "It reminds me that no matter how dirty the world gets, it can always be washed clean." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "You always find meaning in everything." She smiled faintly. "Maybe because I've seen what it's like to lose everything. You start to notice small things, like rain or kindness." Her words lingered in his heart. That evening a thunderstorm rolled through the city. The power went out and the lights in the mansion flickered off. The maids hurried to find candles but Damilola didn't mind. He found Amara sitting in the living room with a small candle glowing beside her. The soft light danced across her face, making her look almost angelic. He sat down beside her. "Looks like the rain wants us to slow down," he said with a smile. Amara laughed softly. "Maybe it's telling us to listen." "To what?" "To silence," she whispered. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. They sat quietly for a while, listening to the rain hit the roof and the wind whisper through the trees. Then Damalola said gently, Amara, I've told you a lot about my work, my company, but you've never told me much about yourself. She hesitated, her smile fading a little. There isn't much to tell. I'd like to hear it anyway. She stared at the candle for a moment before speaking. I wasn't always alone. I had parents who loved me deeply. My father was a carpenter, my mother sold vegetables at the market. We didn't have much, but we had joy. Every Sunday we would sit outside and sing old songs while my father played his guitar. Her voice trembled slightly. One day my father fell ill. We didn't have money for medicine. My mother sold everything to help him, but it wasn't enough. When he died, she lost her strength. Soon after, she passed too. I was only 16. Damalola sat still, his heart tightening. I tried to survive, she continued softly. I went from place to place, hoping someone would give me work. But most people only saw my rags. So I started selling small things, bracelets, carvings, anything to eat. The streets became my home. Tears shimmered in her eyes, though she tried to hide them. Damalola spoke quietly. How did you survive all that, Amara? She looked up at him and said, Faith. I believed that one day God would send a reason for me to smile again. I didn't know it would be you. The room fell silent. The rain outside softened to a gentle drizzle. He swallowed, unsure how to respond. No one had ever said something like that to him, not even those who claimed to love him. He leaned forward slightly. You are the bravest person I've ever met. She looked down shyly. I only did what I had to do. No, he said. You faced the world when it turned its back on you. That takes strength I can't imagine. She smiled faintly, a tear slipping down her cheek. And you gave me hope again. You saw me when no one else did. He reached out slowly, hesitating before gently taking her hand. Then maybe we found each other for a reason. Their eyes met, and in that moment neither of them spoke, but both understood something had changed. The air between them felt different, heavier yet calm, like the quiet after a storm. The candle flickered and her hand stayed in his. Later that night, when the lights finally came back, Amara excused herself and went to her room. She sat on her bed, her heart still racing. She had not meant to open her heart so much, but being with Damalola felt safe, like talking to someone who truly saw her soul. Downstairs, Damalola sat alone, staring at the empty chair beside him. He had met hundreds of people, powerful, rich, ambitious, but no one had ever touched his heart like she did. He thought about her story, her smile, her courage. He realized that for the first time he was not thinking about business or money or success. He was thinking about her. The next morning things felt lighter between them. They walked together in the garden, laughed over breakfast, and even fed the birds that came to the fountain. The staff watched quietly, whispering again, but this time the tone was softer. She has changed him, one cook said. He smiles more now. And it was true. Damalola was no longer the serious man who hid behind meetings and phone calls. With Amara he found joy in the simplest things, in shared meals, in stories, in the sound of her laughter. That evening as the sun began to set, Amara stood by the fountain. Damalola walked up beside her. Do you miss your old life? He asked quietly. She thought for a moment, then said, Sometimes. But not because it was good, because it taught me what really matters. Love, peace, and honesty. He smiled. Those are things money can't buy. She looked at him gently. And yet you have them now. He turned to face her. Because of you. Their eyes locked again, and this time neither of them looked away. Something pure had grown between them, not from riches or pity but from shared truth and kindness. In a world full of noise, they had found something silent yet strong. Love that asked for nothing but to be real. And that night, as the rain returned softly outside, their hearts rested in quiet understanding, that sometimes two very different lives could find the same rhythm when guided by something pure. The calm days did not last long. What had begun as a quiet friendship had now become the talk of the city. People loved stories about the rich, and when they found out that the famous billionaire Damalola Adeyemi was spending his days with a girl who had once lived under a bridge, they could not stop talking. At first it began with whispers. A few photos appeared online, Damalola and Amara walking through the garden, laughing together, or sitting at a charity dinner where he had taken her as his guest. Soon news stations picked up the story. The billionaire and the beggar, one headline said. Love or madness, another read. Everywhere he went people stared. At business meetings, his partners spoke carefully, trying to hide their disapproval. One finally said what others were thinking. Sir, this is not good for your name. The board is worried. People may lose respect for you. Damalola leaned back in his chair, his face calm but his voice firm. If they respect me only for my money, then I don't need their respect. But the more he tried to ignore it, the louder the voices became. Journalists camped outside his gate. Cameras flashed whenever he left the house. Even Amara could no longer walk freely in the garden without hearing whispers from the maids. Do you think he really loves her? She's lucky. Some of us work all our lives and never meet a man like that. Maybe she used him. At first she tried to smile through it. But each day her heart grew heavier. She didn't want to cause him pain. She had seen what the pressure was doing to him, the late nights, the phone calls, the quiet sighs when he thought no one was watching. Then one evening his mother came to the mansion. Madame Adeyemi was a proud woman with kind eyes but a heart shaped by years of society's judgment. She hugged her son tightly and said, "My boy, I have heard things. Is it true? That you plan to marry this girl?" Damalola looked down. "Mother, I love her. She is the reason I have peace again." She shook her head sadly. "You have forgotten who you are. You are an Adeyemi. Your name carries weight. The world will laugh at us if you do this. She is not from our world." He looked at her quietly. "And yet, mother, in her world I found something I never found in ours, honesty." His mother sighed deeply. "Sometimes love must bow to wisdom." But he only replied, "If wisdom means losing her, then I would rather be a fool." Amara stood by the door hearing every word. Her chest tightened. She knew she did not belong in his world. No matter how kind he was, no matter how much he cared, people would never stop judging them. She could not bear to be the reason his family turned against him. That night, when everyone slept, she sat by her window staring at the city lights. Then she took a pen and a small sheet of paper. Her tears fell as she wrote, "Thank you for everything. You gave me more than I ever dreamed. But this world is not mine. Please don't look for me." She placed the note on his desk and quietly walked out. The guards tried to stop her, but she smiled faintly and said, "Tell him I'll be fine." By the time Damalola woke up the next morning, she was gone. He found her note and froze. His heart pounded as he read her words again and again, hoping they would change. But they didn't. His mind filled with panic. He rushed downstairs calling her name, but no one had seen her. Without waiting for anyone, he grabbed his car keys and ran into the storm outside. Rain poured heavily, blurring his vision. He didn't care. He drove through the streets, searching the places she had once spoken of, the old market, the bus station, the bridge near the river. Everywhere he looked, he saw her in his mind, sitting in the rain, alone. Hours passed before he finally saw a small figure sitting near the same street corner where they had first met. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face, but her eyes still carried that quiet sadness he knew so well. He stopped the car and ran toward her, the rain splashing around him. "Amara," he called out. She looked up slowly, shocked. "Why did you come?" she whispered. He knelt beside her, breathless. "Because I can't live without you." She shook her head, her lips trembling. "You don't understand. They'll ruin you because of me. Everyone is talking, even your mother." He took her hand firmly. "Let them talk. Let them write, let them laugh. I don't care. I care about you." Her tears mixed with the rain. "But you'll lose everything." He smiled sadly. "If loving you makes me lose everything, then let it be so." She stared at him, unable to speak. He was kneeling in the mud, a man who owned half the city, his hair drenched, his clothes dripping, yet he looked more human than ever. "Damalola," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Why would you do this?" "Because love isn't a business deal," he said softly. "It's not about profit or loss. It's about truth. You gave me that when I had everything else but peace." Her heart broke open. She had run away to protect him, but all he wanted was to protect her. She covered her face with her hands and cried. He reached out, gently pulling her hands away, and wiped her tears. "Come home," he whispered. She looked at him, the rain still falling between them. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Yes. Not to the mansion. To me." For a long moment they said nothing. Then she stood, her hand still in his. He led her to the car, covering her with his jacket. People watched as the billionaire and the beggar walked side by side through the storm, but this time Damalola didn't hide. Back at the mansion, the staff stared in shock when he entered, soaked but smiling, holding Amara close. His mother stood at the stairs, eyes wide, then softened as she saw the sincerity in her son's face. "Mother," he said gently, "I found her." She looked at Amara, trembling and wet, then sighed. You really love her, don't you? He nodded. With all I am. Madame Adeyemi closed her eyes for a moment, then whispered, Then may God guide you both. That night, after everyone went to sleep, Amara sat by the window once more. The rain had stopped and the moonlight filled the room. She looked at Damilola, who sat across from her, smiling quietly. You shouldn't have come for me, she said softly. He shook his head. I would have crossed oceans for you. And in that stillness, Amara realized something, that love, real love, did not ask for titles or riches. It simply asked for truth. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time, both of them felt at peace, even as the world outside continued to whisper. Because in that moment the storm had passed, not the one outside but the one within their hearts. Months passed and the world slowly moved on from the gossip. The story that once filled newspapers and social media was no longer breaking news. But for Damilola and Amara, every day was a quiet miracle, a reminder of how far they had come. Amara had changed not because of money, but because she finally believed she was worthy of love and dignity. She spent her days helping others, the poor, the forgotten, the ones who still lived where she once slept. Damilola watched her often, amazed by her kindness. She didn't care about the luxury around her. What mattered to her was a child's smile, an old woman's gratitude, or the simple joy of serving food to someone hungry. One afternoon, Damilola called her into his study. He looked excited, almost like a child with a secret. Amara, he said, I want to organize a charity event. Not for business. Not for fame. But for people like you, people who deserve a new start. Her eyes lit up. That's beautiful, Damilola. What will we call it? He smiled warmly. Hope. Because that's what you gave me. For weeks they worked together. The mansion buzzed with activity. Invitations were sent out to leaders, celebrities, and community workers. Reporters were curious again, but this time the story was different. It was not about scandal, it was about change. The night of the event arrived. The grand ballroom was decorated with soft golden lights and white flowers. The air was filled with gentle music, laughter, and warmth. But amid all the luxury, Damilola kept the purpose simple: to raise funds to help the homeless and the children living on the streets. When it was time for him to speak, he walked up to the stage with calm confidence. Cameras flashed, but his eyes searched only for one face, Amara's. She stood near the front, wearing a simple cream dress, her smile soft and shy. He took a deep breath and began, Many years ago I thought being rich meant having cars, houses, and power. But then I met someone who taught me what real riches are. The hall grew quiet. Every ear listened. He looked at Amara and continued, This woman reminded me that real riches are not in gold but in the heart. She came into my life with nothing, no wealth, no name, no fame. Yet she gave me everything that money could not buy: peace, joy, and love. The crowd applauded warmly. Amara lowered her head, shy and overwhelmed. A tear slid down her cheek, not of sadness but gratitude. When the event ended, many guests came to meet her. Some praised her, others thanked her for inspiring them. Even those who had once mocked her now spoke with respect. Damilola's mother stood by her side, smiling proudly. She had grown to love Amara like a daughter, seeing how she made her son a better man. A few weeks later, under a bright morning sun, Damilola and Amara were married. It was not a grand wedding in a five-star hotel, but a small and beautiful one in a quiet garden. Only close friends, family, and a few people from the charity were invited. There were no paparazzi, no noise, only laughter and peace. Amara wore a simple white gown with a small flower in her hair. Damilola wore a plain white suit. They stood before a small altar, holding hands. The officiator smiled and said, Do you promise to love and care for each other in every season of life? I do, Damilola said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. I do, Amara replied, her voice trembling with emotion. When they exchanged rings, the small crowd clapped and cheered. A few of the street children they had helped threw petals in the air. It was a wedding of hearts, not of wealth, one that everyone present would remember forever. After the ceremony, they sat under a tree eating with the guests. Amara laughed freely for the first time in years, her face glowing with joy. Damilola watched her and thought, This is what I was searching for all my life. Together they began working on their dream project, a home for homeless children. They bought a piece of land near the city's edge and built a simple but beautiful shelter. They called it House of Hope. The name came from Amara's idea and Damilola loved it. Soon the shelter became full of life. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter echoing through the walls. Amara spent her mornings teaching them how to read and write. In the evenings, Damalola would join them to tell stories and share food. Sometimes he came in casual clothes, no suits or guards. To the children he was not a billionaire, he was just Uncle Dammy. The House of Hope grew quickly. Volunteers came from different parts of the city to help. Some were inspired by Amara's story, others simply wanted to be part of something good. Donations poured in and within a year they opened a second branch. But despite all the success, Damalola never changed. Every evening he would take a quiet walk alone. The guards thought he was going to check the construction or meet a business partner, but Amara knew where he went. He always stopped by the same street corner, the very spot where he had first seen her, sitting under the dim light, begging for food. One night, she followed him silently. She found him standing there looking at the spot with a faint smile. The street was quieter now. The broken bench where she had once sat was gone, replaced by a small flower pot someone had placed there. She stepped closer and said, "You still come here?" He turned and smiled. "Yes. This place reminds me that love doesn't need to come from perfect places. It can rise even from the dust." She slipped her hand into his. "And you remind me that kindness can change a life." They stood there in silence for a while watching cars pass by. The city lights shimmered and a soft breeze blew around them. Amara leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Do you ever regret it, choosing me over your world?" He looked at her tenderly. "No, Amara. You are my world now." She smiled, her eyes shining in the soft light. "Then I guess love really is the greatest treasure." Damalola chuckled softly. "Yes. And I'm the richest man alive, because I found you." They walked home together, hand in hand, leaving behind the street that had once been a symbol of pain and turning it into a place of hope. Years later, whenever someone asked Damalola how he built his success, he would always smile and say, "A woman who once had nothing taught me everything." And in every corner of the House of Hope, the children grew up hearing the story of the kind woman and the man who saw beyond her scars. A story that began not in a mansion or a ballroom, but on a lonely street under the stars. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are not written in gold or sung by poets. They are written in the heart, and lived in kindness. And so, every evening when the sun went down, Damalola still returned to that same corner, not as a billionaire, but as a man who once found love in the most unexpected place.